Okay, this is Karthik versus Erick. D4, D5. That's pretty good. Now at this point, uh, Karthik's white. He plays E3. I don't really like E3. I think better is C4. And now, yeah, black can take that pawn. But look at how white can actually win this. Like a real common way this might continue if somebody doesn't know what they're doing is black. After E3, white's threatening to regain that pawn. And if black defends the pawn, you can actually counterattack against the pawn that's defending c4. And if he still tries to keep defending that with c6, now all white has to do is take, recapture, and queen f3 wins the rook. Well, I mean, if black, he can play knight c6, but you win the knight at the very least, if not the rook. And so c4 is really good. It's really aggressive. It attacks in the center, and it's well defended. And after e3, there's a possibility of queen f3. E3 is a little passive. There's no reason to defend this pawn, which is already, totally safe and defended by the queen and not under attack at all. Black continues with knight f6. And now here, white played knight c3, although once again I think c4 is a little better. You really want to, put pressure on black's center. And knight c3, yeah, it hits this pawn, but you're not actually going to, take the pawn with your knight. You're much better off using your pawn to counterattack. At this point, Karthik played bishop f5, which, I mean, it's not bad, but same idea for black. I think c5 is really good. If white doesn't play c4, black, you might as well go ahead and play c5. And it's the same idea, trying to undermine their center. But black played bishop f5. White played bishop d3, challenging the bishop, which is kind of why bishop f5 isn't really that great, because white can just play bishop d3 to defend. Here, black went ahead and took the bishop. That's not maybe so great, though. e6 might be better. And you might think here, well, if he takes my bishop and my pawn recaptures, does that, possibly mean that, this pawn has been moved away from the center? White could even continue with queen f3, sort of attacking both of these pawns. But no, this is okay for black. Black can defend. And then it's, planning bishop b4. And I think the main strength of these pawns is they're really locking down the center there on e4. And even more than that, a reason that bishop takes d3 is not so good is once you take that bishop, you actually let white move forward. Karthik played c takes d3. Even better would have been queen takes d3. And so essentially, if you go back to this position, what happened here is black took his bishop off the board for white's bishop, and then he gave white a free move, c takes d3. And white actually could have played queen takes d3. And so that's what really happened there. And so it's not good to take a piece if it lets your opponent recapture moving forward. Now Now after c takes d3, black played knight c6, which is good. Knight f3 is fine. e6 makes sense. Here, white played queen a4. It doesn't really do a whole lot, though. Like, there's no real threat of the queen taking that knight. The queen's not really attacking anything over here. Like, you don't really want to move your queen until you have a really good reason. It's kind of your most valuable piece. You don't want to, like, commit it to one half of the board where it's not actually really doing anything. You know, the pin against that knight's not terribly useful because black is going to castle at some point. Probably better right here would just, you know, for white to castle and then wait to see what black is going to do. But yeah, queen a4 was played. And black continued with bishop b4. It's not too bad. Maybe a little better would even be queen d7, breaking that pin on the c6 knight right away. Bishop b4 was played though. And here, white played e4, which is really bad. We'll look at that in a moment. Knight e5 looks a little better. You know, this, if you're going to pin the knight, then you should probably follow up with an attack against the knight, because the knight can't move. e4 though runs into some trouble. Black can just take it, and then if white were to continue, which is probably his best way, is recapturing, then black takes, and now black's up a pawn. So you really want to make sure that you recognize that there's two pieces for black controlling e4. White only has the pawn there because the knight is pinned to the king. So the knight can't control e4. So e4 loses a pawn. And here, I mean, at very least, white should have recaptured. Queen c2, though, just loses. Now white's losing a knight. So that knight's gone. Now black picks up another pawn on d4. And, you know, probably the best place to put the queen, because it's under attack, is, you know, d1. Queen d1. Queen d2, though, is really bad, as, you know, Erick shows here. Knight takes f3 now wins the queen. King e2, knight takes, bishop takes. Queen d4 is good, centralizing the queen. Bishop e3 tries to get the queen out of there, but now the queen come over to g4 check. Here, maybe king f1 is the best idea to try and move the king to safety, although white's, you know, losing. f3 is not so good because of queen g2 check. And now bishop f2. Here, black tried to exploit the fact that the bishop is pinned with bishop c5. Yeah, that's okay. And white then continued with rook hg1 to try and get the queen out of there. So it doesn't really look like white recognized what black's threat is. You know, probably rook hf1 would have been better to try and defend the bishop, but rook hg1 actually loses the bishop. Although for some reason black didn't go ahead and do that. You know, queen takes f2 check, and white's lost another piece. Instead, black played h2, and now, I mean, that bishop is still under attack. White could have tried like knight d1 to defend it. Instead, he played rook g5, trying to attack the bishop. And now, finally, black plays queen takes f2 check, king d1, queenside castle. Rook takes the bishop, and of course, black could have just taken the rook, but what he actually did is even better. Rook takes d3 check is a great move. You're threatening checkmate now. King c1. And then the key here to getting the checkmate is not to play queen d2 check, which is what was played, although it's still forcing a mate. Even a little better though is rook d2, because now you're really threatening to slide over your pieces, and you can really force a mate there. Like, I don't know if he were to play knight d1, queen slides over, maybe the king will try to get away. Well, that's just, going to be checkmate right there. A lot of different ways to checkmate that. Oh, I'm coughing. The key thing I think to understand here is it's really good to have, a rook and a queen, hold on, like on this line. That's very controlling. But queen d2 check is almost as good. He plays king b1, and now here the checkmate's a little more complicated, but the best way to go about it is actually a rook sacrifice. If you look at this, rook takes the knight, rook recaptures, and knight d5 attacks the rook. And then say if the rook moves, now you have queen d3 check, something like that, threatening checkmate. And you could also try what he actually did in the game is queen e1 check. It's still pretty good. King c2, attacking the undefended rook. Rook d2, king b3, take the other rook, king b4. And notice now you finally got the rook and the queen on this line, but it would have been better if the king were up here rather than all the way down here. King c4. What to do here? Black played knight e4. Maybe a little better would have been knight d5, because then, like, say if he takes the knight, you have an immediate checkmate right there. But actually knight e4 is not bad. If he, takes, say, with his pawn, then you can bring the other rook over. So it's kind of a little knight sacrifice there. I mean, there's really no point in it. You're actually probably better off just immediately playing rook hd8. But black's position is just so bad that it doesn't really matter. He played knight takes e4, and then here I'm not, you guys like weren't exactly clear at what you did, but like right here there's just checkmate again. Going back though, I just want to emphasize, like right here, c4 is really what you should play there. And, you know, here, bishop f5 is maybe not so good. I like c5. And here, e4 for white. That's not going to be any good because it just loses a pawn. And those are some points I think you should really consider.